Many of you watching this video come to YouTube channels like this because you know that you are metabolically damaged. You can just look at me and tell that I'm metabolically damaged. And you come to channels like this because you're looking to get metabolically healthy. You want to see what others are doing, even if they don't necessarily look to be in the peak fitness condition, what they're doing to repair their metabolic damage. And often enough, you start seeing a consistent pattern of traits here, where people who have repaired or are in the process of repairing their metabolic damage, they tend to do certain things. Usually it's cutting down carbohydrates to as low as they can go, with people debating on how low you should go. If you are just a proponent of low carb, then that can be anything underneath like 80 grams of carbs per day. If you're a ketogenic diet person, that's typically under 30 or 40 grams of carbs a day, typically closer to 20. And if you're a carnivore, you're getting that number down as close to absolute zero as you can get. But we're projecting to see a much worse situation in the United States and the Western world in the coming decade, by the end of this decade. Right now, we estimate that only 12% of Americans, it's about 1 in 8, are metabolically healthy. That means 88% of Americans have metabolic damage of some kind or another. And what does metabolic damage mean? It generally means that your body doesn't process the food it gets properly, that you are obese. Basically, metabolic damage manifests itself in a number of different conditions, most commonly in obesity, but with all sorts of other fun issues that people who are on the carnivore diet or a ketogenic diet typically use diets to address. And we know that this is a bad situation, but there was a study that came out in late 2019, just before the events of 2020 that made everything worse, that most Americans aren't, and most Westerners aren't metabolically healthy at all. We know that by the end of this decade, childhood obesity is expected to rise by 60%. There are 537 million people around the world living with diabetes today, up from about 108 million in the 1980s. And that's predicted to be 643 million by the year 2030, and nearly 800 million people will be living with diabetes by 2045. Think about that for a second. Medical costs for obesity alone are expected to exceed $1 trillion by 2025, if they haven't already. And we know this because the numbers I'm giving you are not factoring in the events of 2020 and everything that came in the couple years after. And we know that obesity was was a major driving factor for people who were lost in 2020 to 2023 in the big event you're not permitted to talk about openly on YouTube. Obesity was a major consistent factor in that. It's possible that even by now, even fewer than 12% of people are metabolically healthy. If you're not metabolically healthy, you are at risk for chronic disease. This includes cardiovascular risk factors, anything from just heart palpitations on a regular basis to, heart attack risk and stroke risk and all sorts of other fun things that have a terminal end if they're not addressed. If you are one of the first, if you want to make sure that you are metabolically healthy, there are essentially 5 marks for finding out if you're metabolically healthy. One is a blood sugar test. If your level is consistently below 100 milligrams per deciliter or above 70 milligrams, you're generally going to be considered to be metabolically healthy, between 100 and 70 on the low end and 100 on the high end. If your waist circumference is less than 40 inches for men in diameter and less than 34.6 for women, that's not me. If your blood pressure is at or below 120 beats or 120 over 80 beats, that is me. Cholesterol, your LDL is as low as possible, and HDL cholesterol greater than or equal to 40 milligrams. We'll put an asterisk next to cholesterol, though, because we do have reason to believe that cholesterol is an unfairly demonized hormone, because that's what it is, in the current nutrition understanding of things, that your body uses cholesterol for a number of factors. It's when things get disproportional, those numbers, the HDL and LDL get out of whack, that you start having problems. And it's not red meat that causes this problem. It's going to be your seed oils and it's going to be your carbohydrates that cause this. And if your triglycerides for number 5 are below 150 micrograms or milligrams rather per deciliter. A few things you can of course do to change your metabolic health is of course fix nutrition. That's the number one thing. We all know that. Fixing nutrition is the big one. That's why you come to channels like this. That's why you look to the carnivore and keto doctors, even though they tell you up front that they had to learn all their nutrition that they learned themselves. They had to teach themselves and put it into practice in their practices, which is why they're experts. They actually tend to have a in-the-field expertise. But most of the time, they had to teach themselves because, as it turns out, most of the time, they're not taught anything in med school about nutrition. Then the number 2 thing, better nutrition, of course, is number 1. Number 2 is more exercise. Look, most people don't exercise. And I'm not saying everybody needs to go hit the gym. I have a gym membership. I love my gym membership. I love my gym. But truth be told is if you have a sedentary lifestyle, if you have a history of being a couch potato, start by just getting up and getting to like the baseline movements that a normal person should have every day. If that's 10,000 steps or not, I mean, a day, that's a good baseline, I guess, but get to a baseline of moving first. And then start looking to see if you can do some light exercises at home or more time in the garden out in the sun. And if that's not possible, if a gym is more convenient, then go to a gym. And if you ever want someday, maybe I'll give you a guide on how to choose the right gym for you based on your goals and what your needs are. But you should be exercising in some way. And for a lot of people, exercise is simply doing things you find to be fun. Hiking, playing outdoor sports, riding a bike, going on long walks, walking the dog. You know, if you walk your dog on a regular basis, your dog will get healthier, and so will you. They need to walk anyway. Adequate sleep, which we typically understand is 8 hours of sleep per day, but most carnivores, in my experience, don't get 8 hours of sleep. We get less sleep, but it's the most magnificently efficient sleep we've ever had in our lives. I don't know what it is about it, but I can tell you that I sleep like 5 hours a night, and I'm far more rested than I do if I get 8 hours on a non-carnivore diet. And then, of course, reduce your stress. I mean, look, in the modern world, we are masters of stressing ourselves out. You turn on the television and it's fear, 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 fear. It's all politics. Everything is political. You go to work and the pressure at work to perform and increase your performance and increase your productivity, and all the rest causes stress. On top of the economic conditions out there and everything else going on, we're all pretty stressed out. You got to find time to reduce your stress. Maybe tune out some of the politics, dial back some of the consumption of that media. Reconnect with your religious beliefs if you have any. Just take care of what your stressors are and reduce your stress. But one thing is for certain, 12% of Americans, maybe less, are metabolically healthy. That is not sustainable. We have to do something about that. And we know in these nutrition spaces, the first place we try to address is with nutrition, but it really is a holistic thing. We have to address the whole human being, everything about us. And, nutrition is a big part of it. And that begins by tossing out nutritional orthodoxy. I'll have a video for you later this week about how one of the big figures out there who loves to go after anybody who eats animal foods at all is telling us that even half an egg a day is bad for you. It will destroy you. You have to defeat that stuff. Nutritional orthodoxy, such as it is dangerous and has destroyed a lot of lives. And that's, of course, just leading to more metabolic damage and metabolic unhealth out there. Are you metabolically healthy? If you are, congratulations. You practically won the lottery, even if it was all because you've been diligent about your own health. Compared to everybody else out there, you're doing pretty good. Let me know in the comments, please, and if or how metabolic damage manifests for you. I'm curious, especially if it's not necessarily morbid obesity or whatever, but other things, other metabolic damage. Let me know in the comments. Like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help. Sharing this on social media helps a lot too. I'm Anthony Stine, the Practical Carnivore. Thanks for tuning in.